Hey, what's up, everyone? Today we're going to talk about how to get a raft started using a Shinpaku or Kishu Juniper. I put this tree in this box about a year ago, and it was an upright juniper that was just growing in a 3-inch container. The original roots are right here, and I pretty much didn't mess with them. I just left them alone and planted those at one end of the box. Then I wired the trunk, which became the actual raft line, to sort of meander along horizontally through the box. And I also added a little bit of undulation so it wasn't just flat when it comes out of this box and goes onto something where you can actually see that portion of the raft. That movement will be really nice and hopefully help the raft be better than it would be otherwise. You know, avoiding straight things is almost always a good thing. So it's growing nicely. I cut all the branches off of the bottom side, obviously, and I think there was only one, which is why I chose this to be a raft. And what you can see is that, so this was the top of the plant when it was in a vertical position. This part is growing most strongly, and unfortunately, there's one little section right here near the base that didn't make it. So it's very likely that as this matures as a raft, that the original root ball will just be cut off and it'll rely on the roots that issue from the trunk. So the great thing about junipers, about these Shinpaku, so this is actually a Kishu variety, but Itoigawa, the regular Shinpaku, and this all do about the same thing. They will just issue roots. If you bury the trunk like this, it'll just issue new roots straight out of there without any coaxing. You don't have to scar it. You don't have to add rooting hormone. You don't have to do anything. You just have to bury it and kind of keep it wet. And if you're having trouble keeping it wet, you can just pile a little sphagnum moss over the top of it. You can also use rooting hormone, but it's just not really necessary. So in some of the rafts that I've made, I've actually kept the original root base and it adds some character to it. But because of the distance here with no foliage, I would either have to, graft foliage back here at this point or just plan on removing some portion of this. But I won't make that decision until the tree is grown on for a little while. And each one of these sort of tufts, it has already been wired with a smaller wire to either give it a twist or a little bit of movement, or both, and those were kind of harmonized. These whips are what's going to make the tree get bigger, so I'm not going to touch this. I'm also not going to touch, these masses of foliage at this point, because really I'm just trying to get this thing to grow out and become a much bigger plant. So each one of these whips is potentially a trunk, and it's just going to take a few more years until this gets to the point where I would even thin it. I would say maybe 2 years from now, I might be thinning and making some structural decisions. And for right now, all I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take off a little bit of wire and make sure the box is actually leaking soil out the side here. So I'm gonna just do a little bit of maintenance and checking on it, but not really working on the plant. All right, so I thought that this end of the raft was already wired, but basically from here out, none of the things that are going to become trunks have been wired. So I'm going to go ahead and thin this out so I can get the wire in it. I'm going to thin it out as little as possible, but I can't get the wire in there unless I do some thinning, and then I will apply some wire and create some twists. One of the challenging things with doing a composition like this is that you want all of these trunks to kind of match each other. You don't want them all doing their own thing and looking kind of funny. So at this stage, you can't really see the trunk line. And so it's kind of challenging to bend the trunk to match another trunk. But what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna pull off enough of this foliage so I can see the trunk line and put a wire on there. And then I'm gonna try to create complementary movement in each one of the trunks. Doesn't mean that they're not gonna be identical, but they will sort of go together visually. And the other challenge with this is that if you're using one wire to wire two trunks, standard wiring technique would have you going clockwise around one and counterclockwise around the other. But that means that as you're twisting, you're gonna be twisting in opposite directions. And typically in the wild, if you see a tree that has a sort of twisting lifeline or twisting bark patterns, it's very common in white bark pines in the mountain, that those twists are all going to be in the same direction. So we actually want to make sure that all of our twists are either clockwise or counterclockwise, not a mix of the two. And I can look back at these trunks and tell from the wire that I just took off, as well as the way that they're twisted, that all of the trunks so far have been wired in a clockwise motion. So I'm going to continue that pattern through the rest of these trunks. And even if I might later split this into two separate rafts by using this half and this half separately, but that doesn't really matter as of right now. I just need to make sure that it can all be used together as one big piece. All right, well, that was a little bit more work than what I was thinking it was gonna be, but what I did was just repair the box because it was leaking soil out this side, then excavate to see the entire line, remove the wire that I had used to bend that original trunk line so that it doesn't end up cutting in. It wasn't cutting in yet, and the sections closest to the base actually were the loosest, whereas the sections closer to what was originally the top have formed more wood. So after I removed that, I then wired each one of the unwired trunks. Had to do a little bit of thinning because they were forking, and I want to just have the tree concentrate on one main fork for each trunk rather than having the trunks split as they go up. So I added a wire. All of these wires are going clockwise when you look down from above, and I actually noticed that it looks like one of the trunks was wired in a counterclockwise direction. I'm gonna leave that alone for right now, but that might mean that ultimately I end up removing that trunk to make the movement match. So it'll be probably late this summer or fall or even winter the next time I take a look at this plant, and until then it'll just be out in the field growing. See you guys next time.